Hello and good afternoon from London on a cold and wet and grey autumn afternoon. This is Dr. Dermot Hudson, Chairman of the Juche Study Group of England, Chairman of the UK Korean Friendship Association and official delegate of the KFA for the UK, and President of the Association for the Study of Songun Politics. Now, I thought today I would say a few words about a topical subject, namely Bolivia. And I'm sure, as everybody will know, the progressive government, the anti imperialist government of President Evo Morales, was overthrown as a result of intrigue and conspiracy by pro imperialist forces within Bolivia and the puppets of US imperialism in Bolivia. It was one of these sort of regime change color revolutions that the US has been very active in promoting in the last 15, 20 years. This has become a sort of standard pattern for imperialist regime change in a lot of countries when they want to get rid of governments they don't like. In the past, it was the old fashioned military coups like the ones you saw in Brazil and Chile and elsewhere. And in fact, indeed, President Kim Il sung once remarked that the Park Chung-hee fascist coup in South Korea in 1961, May 1961, became the model for US imperialist neo-colonial rule in many third world countries. But since then, imperialist tactics have tended to evolve a bit. So you have the colour revolution. And this was instigated within Bolivia. And what happened significantly was that the police and armed forces refused refused to support President Morales. Now, that was a very crucial question. And that's where the experience of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the Songun idea and Juche idea come into practice. Because Morales, who I'd personally regard as being anti-imperialist and progressive, some hailed in the past Bolivia as a great model of socialism, basically pursued power through power and social change through a reformist road, and the institutions of the state were basically left untouched. And these institutions are the army, the police force, the judiciary, the civil service, and so on. The experience of the DPRK was very different. It has successfully built socialism for 74 years. And in the DPRK, socialism came about through the independence struggle, through the liberation struggle. And basically, in Korea, the old state machine of Japanese imperialism was smashed completely. And the remnants of Japanese imperialist colonial rule were liquidated, and they built a totally new state with new institutions, and the Korean People's Army was founded in 1948 based on the Korean People's Revolutionary Army, which had fought the Japanese imperialists for 15 years. So you had a new state, a people's state, grow up on the ruins of Japanese imperialism. They didn't use existing institutions to try and promote people's democracy or socialism in Korea. So that's the big difference. And President Kim Il Sung always stressed the importance of the armed forces in the revolution. Later, this became known as the Songun, or military first policy. President Kim Il Sung himself took an interest in Latin America, and the Workers' Party Korea had relations with many revolutionary and anti-imperialist parties in Latin America. And President Salvador Allende of Chile was a great friend of the DPRK and a personal friend of the great leader, President Kim Il Sung. And, you will see pictures on the internet of the meeting. President Kim Il Sung advised the Chilean progressives who'd formed the Popular Unity government after winning elections in 1970 to take hold of the armed forces. But sadly and regrettably, this advice was not taken to heart. And as we all know, in September 1973, General Pinochet, with the full backing of the US imperialists and the CIA, carried out a coup in Chile, overthrowing Comrade Allende, who died in the coup. I believe personally he was slaughtered by the Chilean fascist forces. Some claim that he took his own life, but the fact is he was killed one way or another in the coup. And this was a very bitter lesson. And we've seen the same process repeated in other countries. Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, the imperialist regime change tactics have evolved a bit. So the Bolivian coup, in some of its formats, was a bit different to the Chilean coup, but nevertheless, in essence, the same thing. A progressive government being toppled by reactionary forces, being instigated and wire pulled by forces from outside. And that's another important lesson. The DPRK has always been totally independent. As John Major said, it's a country with undiluted independence, undiluted sovereignty. And the DPRK doesn't have a single foreign soldier stationed on its soil, and it's totally independent in all respects. So no outside forces can try and interfere and topple the government. So basically, Juche and Songun are the sort of bedrocks of the DPRK's independence and of its socialism. And though we've seen many progressive governments destroyed, and indeed some socialist countries were frustrated. The socialist system collapsed in those countries. Socialism in the DPRK, led by respected Marshal Kim Jong-un, will defy all imperialist attempts at regime change. It will defy the sanctions, and it will march on to final victory. Thank you for listening.